And here is a slide for our first presenter, Elaine Larsen of Northeast Handspinners Association, nehandspinners.org. And this is on one side a picture of the website. And if you're not sort of techie, whenever you see these three lines, that means click on it. It's the menu. And they have events going on, which Elaine will tell you about. I got to know Elaine this year. She tapped me on the shoulder for MAFA at the conference and said, "Oh, hi, we were wondering if you might want to come to our open house." And the minute I looked at Elaine, I just liked her right at that moment. I was like, yes. I didn't really know what I was saying yes to. I just instantly liked Elaine. And it was like, yes, Elaine is just fantastic. So when we were putting together Distaff Day, I said, Elaine, let's promote Northeastern Handspinners Association, and also what you do, because Elaine has her own sheep. She's in what we call upstate New York in New York City, which is anything north of the Bronx. She's in the Albany area. And, and here she is. So I'm going to spotlight Elaine.
Oh, hello everybody. Thank you. And this is Misty, aka the Princess. She may leave now that I'm starting to talk. Yeah, there we go.
She's an introvert cat.
No, there's something about when I start talking, but she knows when I sit down in front of the computer that maybe I'm on a Zoom thing and I'm going to be there for hours so she can sleep on me. But I guess when I'm talking, it interrupts her sleep. So anyway, I'm going to share my screen because I have guess what? A little slideshow, but I wanted to, all right, let me get slideshow.
And by the way, Elaine is a professor, retired professor now, but she said, I'm resisting the urge to put double the slides and have a quiz afterwards. And I said,
Exactly.
I said, do
No,
the quiz. We'll love it.
no quiz. So yes, I'm a retired biologist, a shepherd, and an enabler of trying to get other people who want to enjoy fiber arts to give it a try. Um, and of course any slideshow that talks about sheep, you have to have what I heard called lamb porn. So here's the lamb porn for this slideshow right here on the front page. Um, I primarily work with two different organizations. One is the Golden Fleece Spinners and Weavers Guild, which is based in Schoharie, New York, in the Northern Catskills. You can find us on Facebook, but confusingly, there are two guilds in New York State that call themselves Golden Fleece. The other one is over near Syracuse, so you just have to make sure geographically you're looking at the right one. But if you're anywhere in the Northern Catskills or Capital District area, and you're interested, please check out what we do. And we'd be more than happy to have you either join us or just visit at a meeting. Um, which actually brings me to, I am going to be leaving the meeting shortly after 1 because Golden Fleece has their meetings usually on the first Sunday afternoon of the month, but this year um, we're doing it today, January 11th, because of the holiday weekend last weekend. And I'm hosting that, guess what, on Zoom. So I have to go do that immediately after this. So if it seems like I'm leaving abruptly, it has nothing to do with this lovely event. I wish I could stay, but I have another commitment. Um, as we've already mentioned, Northeast Handspinners Association, our region is really New England and New York is where we have representatives on our board. But if you're south of there or somewhere else and you're going to be in the area and want to come to our event, you are more than welcome. Please just take a look. Our website is there. And as we mentioned, in 2026, our event is what we call the Gathering. It's an entire weekend. We hold in even numbered years, conveniently out of sync with MAFA and news, we hold our big weekend event. In odd numbered years, we have our 1 day open house, which Gigi was at and was wonderful. So that's primarily what our organization does, is organize these events to try to support hand spinners. We also have grants and scholarships. So if you are interested, please do check us out. And now my topic here is 2 examples of breed-specific sock yarns. When Gigi asked me to do this, I was like, what should I talk about? So what I'm specifically talking about in this, today is 2 projects that I worked on this year. I've been spinning yarn for socks from my sheep for years. So if you can see my window, this is Cotswold wool made into a boot sock. And this is what I made for years, is big, heavy boot socks out of long wool. So this year I was working, as I said, on 2 things. One was a challenge project from the Ontario Hand Spinners Seminar, where I had gotten as, as starter material some unwashed Gotland wool. And then the other was a study group that I did with our guild here, where we had a whole bunch of people joined in, and we each took a pound of Dorset wool from polled Dorsets, and I named it Fleece to Socks as the study group, but I made it clear people could spin and knit for or weave for whatever they wanted. My goal was to help people in the guild who hadn't done it before start with raw fleece and end up with something. And I also wanted to underline the fact that you can knit socks out of something other than merino. um, in fact, you can knit really, really good socks out of something other than merino. So, and to use wool from a breed that is typically considered, like who would spin that, right? So the 2 sheep breeds, if you're not familiar with them, Gotlands are a rare breed. They are all shades of gray. And if you look at the picture, if you can see, their fleece is sort of falling open because the fleece is a long wool type. It has distinct locks. We'll look closer at the fleece in a minute. Dorsets, this is my friend Pat Canada's herd of polled Dorsets, and they have a much denser fleece. It's a down type wool. They're considered typically to be a meat breed. So often the people who are raising them don't even try to, you know, present the fleece for use. It's just something they have to get rid of every year. So I scarfed up some of these fleeces and we divided them among our guild members, and this is what we did. Here's lock structure. So on the left of your screen is a comparison. There's the Gotland locks. I confessed to putting this together this morning, and I didn't think to put a ruler in this picture, but the Gotland locks are 4 to 7 inches long. There's a good bit of variability in the locks. The Dorset locks were 3 to 4. And we also had a black Cheviot fleece, which we split up a little bit of because we figured it would make a nice contrast with the Dorset. It's another down type wool, and that fleece had about a 4-inch staple length. And one of the things to think about when you compare wools like this is the Gotland, as many long wools, has almost no crimp. The crimp is basically just that curl in the fleece. But if you look, I did a close-up against the dark background so you could see it. The Dorset fleece is so crimpy. It's like my hair on the worst day of summer. It's just frizz. So, and it's like that all the time. It's very, very densely crimpy. And it's considered a medium wool, so it's not as fine as the merinos, but that also means that it's nice and sturdy. You're not going to wear through these socks anytime soon. So our process, and these are pictures from the group that did the Fleece to Socks project with me, but I followed the same process. We took our fleeces, we washed them, We ended up, almost everybody, I think, combed them. Carding, this was a wool link that typically you would card rather than comb, but the fleeces had so much debris in them that the only way to make them usable was to comb them. But that worked really well. We were not using, big multi-row combs. Most of us were using single or double row combs. Um, but the fleece combed up beautifully with very little waste. And then for spinning, everybody did their own thing. I spun mine long draw, which you might say, wait a minute, if you're doing a combed prep, that's usually like a combed top. That's not something you would use a long draw on. You use long draw on carded Rolags. That's the thing about that fleece is it is so bouncy and so crimpy that even though technically it was a combed top, you could long draw spin it because the crimp was so active that it acted like a Rolag. And then on the bottom row are three examples from the guild of some of the yarn that people spun up. I just want to heap extra praise for the one in the middle. That spinner just started spinning this spring, and that's, yarn she made this summer. So she did a fantastic job. Um, and then, so I think most people ended up with yarn, and some people made some finished items that I can show you later. But if anybody wants to do, as part of a guild, this was a great experience to do this with other people, and kind of check in over the summer and share these skills. Oh, and then finally, I did for my yarns, I wet finished them with a hot water soak and a couple of really good wax, if you're familiar with that finishing technique. So this is to compare the Gotland yarn and the Dorset yarn. The pictures I showed you were from our fleece to sock project were of the Dorset yarn, but I did do the same thing with the Gotland yarns or the Gotland wool. So the Gotland yarn that I made was a 2-ply. It was 14 wraps per inch. The Dorset yarn was a 3-ply that was 16 wraps per inch. So they were rather similar. The big difference between these yarns is that the Gotland yarn had almost no elasticity. So remember, everything else about these yarn, the way this wool was prepared and spun was the same. But the Dorset yarn had twice the elasticity. You can stretch it out and it returns to size. You can stretch the Gotland yarn, but only a tiny bit. And the that's because of the crimp. Yarn, wool with more crimp will make a much more elastic yarn. And that's something that I had found earlier. As I said, I made basically boot socks, big sturdy socks from some of my Cotswold wool. It has very little elasticity. So you have to knit the sock the size of your foot. If you put in a lot of negative ease, you're knitting a sock for somebody else with smaller feet. Um, and by the way, the Gotland is the gray. I should have pointed that out. And the Dorset is the white in those pictures. So there's what I made with my Gotland yarns. The light and the medium gray are both Gotland preparations. The black is actually a Wensleydale roving that I got because I couldn't find any Gotland that was a lot darker than my medium gray there, and I wanted the contrast. So these again are a boot style sock. They're pretty thick, but I wear boots a lot this time of year, so they serve me very well. And those patterns are traditional Gotland patterns that are used on the Gotland Island. So that was my challenge for that particular guild activity. And from the Dorset yarn, on the left are two socks that people in the project have knit with their yarn. And one of the women who knit socks with this yarn won first place in one of our local fairs in the fiber arts, um, one of the fiber arts categories. She was really, really pleased. I have not knit mine up yet because I got distracted on some other projects, holidays and all that. But I'll show you, this is my big ball of Dorset yarn. From my 1 pound of raw fleece, I got 8 ounces of yarn and a total of 1,760 yards before wet finishing. So it's probably a little smaller now. Um, and it is nice and bouncy. And so I'm looking forward to knitting some more socks. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and or just any comments or anything else that people have explored. I will say when I was spinning the Dorset yarn, I was actually traveling when I started spinning it, and I was since I was traveling, I had taken my Ashford Joy with me, and I had it on its highest setting. And what I found, because of the crimp in that yarn, I was putting more twist into it than anything I've ever spun before. I mean, that long wool, I had to put barely any twist in. And literally with, I'm spinning long jaw. So literally with that Dorset, I would draft out and I would sit there and treadle 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, feed in, draw out, treadle 1, 2, 3, 4. It was driving me nuts. And if I put any less twist in it, as soon as I let the tension off the yarn, it went boom into this fuzzy mess. Um, so when I got home, I pulled out my old flax wheel, which has a much higher ratio, the antique wheels usually do. And I spun the other two plies on that, and they did look very different. The ply that I made on the Ashford with, the lower ratio and the slower twist, was fuzzier, and the other two were smoother. But I applied them all together, and in the end, you couldn't really tell the difference. But I will stop talking. And I saw one hand, so please
Oh,
unmute yourself and chime in. I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
so I was wondering,
Hi.
this is Donna Ritter. I was wondering what it feels like, the Dorset yarn, like what's the feel of it? If you're
Well,
wearing it as a sock, you want it to feel good on your foot, right?
right. I mean, I have to admit my feet are not nearly as sensitive as, my chin or my neck. This is not something that I would want to wear right up against, my neck, places that tend to itch. I have, personally, I have no problem with this type of yarn on, as a second layer or as mittens or socks. I've actually used coarser wool than this for socks, and I've never had a problem with it. I know that's highly individual. So I'm not trying to tell other people, what you should feel. But for me, I have no problem with this at all. And nobody else in the project mentioned that they thought it was too coarse to use.
Yeah.
Even with all that, I was very concerned that with all that twist, I was making wire. Um, and it really is not, I don't know if you can see this. Maybe I should stop sharing my screen and make myself bigger, but this is how much elasticity there is. It's really, really bouncy. And I think that helps in that it has a lot of give to it. It's not clamping itself down on you.
Mhm. Thank you.
I think
Elaine?
I was
Oops, sorry. So Blue and then whoever else was chiming in.
Okay.
okay. Um, so as someone who is halfway through a project where I scoured my own fleece, prepped the fiber, and am trying to spin sock yarn,
Ah,
um, do you have a recommendation for twist angle? Is my first question. And my second question is, have you ever tried doing an opposing ply, 3-ply yarn for socks?
good questions. I will admit I am not enough of a geek that I actually measure twist angle. I honor you for doing that. What I will say is that what I ended up doing for the Dorset is I put in enough twist that when like I said, there was a distinct event when I was using a lower twist, that when I would let the tension, I'm sitting there, and if I just stop the wheel and let the tension off the single, literally the single went, it like poofed. And so I figured out how much twist I needed to put in to keep it from going poof. Um, and that's, and then I used that, basically counting treadles on the wheels I was using to get to that point. For the long wools, I tend to put in the least amount of twist I can get away with to get a smooth, firm yarn. So it's essentially the same thing. The long wools won't poof on you, but you know, I do when I start, I make a sample. I do a bunch of different amounts of twist, and and let them ply back until I get the yarn I'm looking for. And then I make a card with singles and the plied yarn that I'm looking for, and that's right next to me because that big ball of yarn I showed you, I spun all those singles before I started plying because that's how I find I can try to stay consistent. Um, so I have that card right next to me to compare and make sure I'm not going back to my default, which is not always what I'm actually trying to spin. Um, and so with the long wools, that's what I'm looking for, is something that for socks, I want it to be fairly firm, but and obviously it has to hold together, but I use the least amount of twist I can get away with. And those yarns do have a significantly lower twist angle than the Dorset did because of that whole poof effect. Did that answer your question?
Little. Oh, and
Yeah.
before we change to my second question, I just wanted to share a trick for all of us who use e-spinners and can't count our twist by the number of treadles. Is of course you could always do the how many times does my flyer go around in a circle, but if you already have a spun yarn and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what my twist per inch is, or because that's usually what people use. If you are a nerd like me and you have the math calculations and you want to figure out, oh, my TPI or twist per inch is this, that means my plying twist per inch should be this number, but you use an e-spinner and you can't figure out what your treadles, how many times it goes around with your whirl ratio. You can take either a paper clip or these little black alligator clips,
Mm-hmm.
and you pinch them onto your yarn. I spin really fine, so you can't actually see what I'm doing here. You pinch them onto a section of your single, an inch apart, and then you count the number of times you have to turn one of them around in order to straighten out your fiber. And that is your TPI. So you can keep a couple of these little clips next to your e-spinner and measure that way, or you can get a twist angle card and use that. But that, of course, will change depending on the thickness that you spin. But yeah. Um, but yeah, leaving Nerd Town now. Yeah, have you ever tried doing opposing plies for socks?
That's right. Sorry, I forgot your second. I did that once and I hated it so much that I decided that I really like my sock yarn. So I tried it, and I cast no shade on people who want to do that and who think it's fun to do that, but um it was not something I personally am going to pursue. How about you? Have you tried it and do you like it?
Well, I'm asking because I told myself that's what I'm going to do for this project, and I have never done it before. So glad to know I've set myself up for something interesting.
Interesting. Do you have a tensioned lazy Kate?
No, but I am a woodworker and I make my own spindles and other fiber arts tools. So
Right.
I have the blueprints for one, which is kind of the same as having one.
I mean, you can make one. You can either even make one with some dowels or straight knitting needles and a shoebox. Just make sure that you do that in a way that you can run a cord over, tie it off on the each end of the box and run a cord over your bobbins so you can tension them because you will not be able to ply easily with opposing plies without something like that. That was one of my experiences. Um,
Understood. Thank you
so
for the advice.
absolutely. Good luck. Let us know how it turns out. There was somebody else, I think.
Yes, Elaine, I'm a novice spinner, and I never heard before about percentage of elasticity. And can you like talk about what that means for like, is there such a thing as an average, or can you
Oh,
just talk about that a little bit?
sure, sure. I can't, maybe somebody else has an average or something. I will say that to me, and let me just say too, I had never really measured it before, but I just knew in handling these yarns that the elasticity was very different. So I measured it in a very high-tech way, which is that I put one of my kids' wooden rulers from elementary school on the table, and I put the yarn next to it, nice and relaxed, not buckled, but under no tension. I grabbed it an inch apart, on the ruler and stretched as far as I could just using my fingers. And so that's why on the slide it said for the um, for the Gotland, I could stretch it, 1 inch to 1 1/8. And with the Dorset, I could stretch 1 inch to 1 1/4. And then when you let go, the yarn relaxes to its original state because you could stretch it further. I mean, if I grabbed those yarns and pulled as hard as I could probably get more stretch before they broke. But there's a point at which the stretch that you're getting is actually damaging the structure of the yarn. And when you let go, it won't relax back to its original length. It's now permanently distorted. So what I was looking for is how much natural elasticity do I have where the yarn retains its shape? Because that's what we want. We don't want our sweaters growing down into tunics. So we want that lovely bouncy yarn that will return to its original shape. Um, so this is the first time I ever really tried to quantify it. I don't really, I probably don't interrogate that much. The most of the yarns that you buy these days for commercial yarns are woolen spun. And so typically woolen spun yarns are intrinsically bouncier, fuzzier, and more elastic than worsted spun. Um, but one of the reasons that I think it's significant in this particular project is that most people will knit socks with what we call negative ease. Is there anybody that wants that term explained? Just raise your hand or give a holler.
Oh, and we have to wind up in a minute, Elaine.
Yes, yes. So most people will knit socks with negative ease, about 10% negative ease. And if you do that with that Gotland yarn, like I said, you may be knitting socks for somebody else, which is very kind of you, but maybe not what you had intended. So I think that's where the elasticity becomes more important is when you're knitting a garment that is close fitting. You're using negative ease and you're counting on that yarn to stretch to give you a form-fitting garment or item. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Wow, Elaine, that I loved that. I love Gotland too. Like I don't know so much about Dorset, but oh my goodness, I absolutely love Gotland, and that was amazing to see. Wow.
Yeah, that the it was probably hard to see in the photographs, but the Gotland wool really has a sheen, a shine to it. It's very smooth and shiny. So it
Yeah.
is a lot of fun. And I certainly don't, cast aspersions on any yarn here. This wasn't meant to say, oh, you should knit this kind of, wool or that kind of wool. It was just more descriptive of know what you're getting into.
Yeah, exactly. And before we move on to our next speaker, I'll just say if any of you have not spun with Gotland, it's like silvery locks. It's the most incredible. I mean, just get some Gotland locks and give it a go. It's so beautiful. Oh, wow. So thank you, Elaine. Thank you for making the time to be here. And yeah, that was
Yeah.
fantastic. And
Thank
I
you for the invitation. I wish everybody else a really wonderful afternoon. I wish I could stay, but off I go to more Zoom.
hope.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, Elaine.